Okay, now it's no. Okay, now it's now or never. Last attempt today. Sony Xperia X versus Samsung Galaxy S7. And yes, I know it would make a lot more sense to compare the Xperia X performance versus the S7, but the X performance isn't out yet. I have this one still, and for me it makes enough sense to compare these two, especially since the overall experience was way closer than I thought. And I forgot the second reason. Yes, yeah. Oh man. But no, I said it would be the last attempt. So yeah, let's just get into it. In terms of the design, sorry. The X is a little bit taller, but in terms of thickness and width, according to the spec list, absolutely the same. The S7 feels a little bit smaller and compact in the hand due to the curves, but therefore the X feels a little bit more secure due to the more omni-balanced design, so I actually like that. In terms of the power button placement, both absolutely great, but I prefer the fingerprint reader placement of the X because no matter what you do, it's a very convenient position and it unlocks pretty much every time. I absolutely love that. On the S7, I actually turned it off because it was a little bit too annoying for me. Volume rocker placement isn't great on both. The one here is too low and the one here is on the wrong side too high, at least from my perspective. We have the headphone jack at the top on the X and on the bottom on the S7. We have one speaker here on the bottom on the S7 and front-facing stereo speakers on the X. Overall, I think still the S7 feels a little bit more premium due to glass on glass, but that's a personal preference. They do nothing wrong on the Sony with the metal back. It feels great, feels very round and way better than any Sony phone ever. But a lot of people would still say this is a little bit boring design. I can't really agree because for me it's important that it feels great in the hand, which this one absolutely does. It's very compact, feels just great, can't complain at all. The S7 is great, but I have a little bit of an issue lately that it feels like I would push the phone out of my hand due to the curves. Feels still great, feels compact. And it comes really down to what you personally prefer. Both are absolutely doing a great job, so I would say it's time to talk about the display. If you want the more impressive display with the nice and pretty much infinite contrast and great black levels, the S7 is your choice. But if you want a more natural calibration, more accurate colors, a kind of more vibrant and bright screen, because especially indoors the X seemed even brighter than the S7. And it makes a fantastic job. The blacks are of course not on AMOLED level, but way better than ever before. So I have to give it to Sony. They made a great display. It's not maybe a huge leap over the Z5, but since they improved the viewing angles and blacks, I still give it a win over that. But the S7 for me personally feels a little bit more impressive, but the whites are where the X definitely wins. In terms of sound, let's check what we have here. And I'm not sure if someone will disagree, but we will see. Okay, and I'm just laughing because of all the failed attempts that I had and how things worked out a little bit off. So let's just do it. I want to have fun today. So I'm not sure how well the microphone picks it up, but I'm pretty sure the sound wave will prove me right. The S7 feels louder, it is definitely louder, and the wave will prove that, but it's also a lot richer. Of course, the placement isn't the best. During gaming, I blocked it quite often, where it's better in terms of immersiveness on the X, but therefore it's just not loud enough and it doesn't sound quite rich enough. It's clear and really nice after all, but in my opinion just not loud enough. And then the same actually goes for the headphone jack quality as well, because the S7, due to a few options like adapt sound and the equalizer and so on, is the overall better sounding phone because it actually is able to drive my ADH-M50s loud enough. Not nearly as good as the HTC 10, but still absolutely fine, absolutely satisfying. Where I still think on the Z series, ever since the first Z and now with the X, the maximum volume on the headphone jack just isn't loud enough. Totally fine for earphones, but for an ADH-M50, I personally couldn't hear loud enough, and it's just not a nice enough sound. It's totally fine and it sounds good, and maybe there are some tweaks to it, but overall it just can't compete with the S7 here. Now if we talk about the performance, the first thing that surprised me a lot when I did a side-by-side comparison, app launch times, because the X pretty much all the time actually won. But this is just about the launch times. If we go into the browser, then okay, I still give the win to the X, because the browser performance is absolutely flawless, where it's just not so much on the S7. It still stutters a little bit, lags a little bit. It's good enough, I would say, but nowhere near a proper real flagship. I'm a little disappointed here. If you use the Samsung browser, it's totally fine. App performance is absolutely great on both. Both are very smooth, pretty much lag-free. What I prefer on the S7 is this super crazy buttery smooth scrolling that just seems with a higher frame rate than any other phone that I've had so far, and this is the biggest benefit for me, because it might not be the very fastest lag-free phone, but it's crazy smooth, at least as if it is. The X though, absolutely fine, super smooth overall all around. 3GB of RAM do a totally fine job for multitasking. Absolutely flagship level performer, even though it's not even a flagship, and the 650 even in games knows to deliver a top-notch performance, super smooth, and I actually found it to be better in games than the S7 that just has to push 1440p instead of the X that just has to push 1080p. So I think the more horsepower that the Exynos chip has gets leveled due to the higher resolution, so keep that in mind. Now if you talk about the battery, charging time is a little better on the S7 with about 1 hour and 40, where it's slightly over 2 hours on the Xperia X. But in terms of battery life, they are actually closer than I expected to, because I get a little bit more than, or let's say easy, solid 6 hours plus on Wi-Fi only on the S7, where I got 5.5, 540, 6 hours as well, a little bit plus sometimes on the X as well. Now where the difference is though is on data, because on data my S7, at least for me at my workplace, has quite a bad drain. Where it's a little bit better here on the X, still not perfect or something like that, but in mixed use they get very close, because I get about 4.5 on both, and I would say if it's data only, I think the X would actually even win. I still personally give the S7 a slight win, because Wi-Fi drain is also very important for me, and here it's still noticeably better, but both absolutely top notch. Now, when it comes to the software, of course, that's something you have to decide, because it's still TouchWiz versus a Sony UI that is very stock-like, because it is just a themed stock, which is nice, and has a few enhancements like some audio stuff and also white balance settings in the display controls and something like that. But I still give the win personally, even though it's way more bloated and way heavier on the system. The TouchWiz system just offers a lot more options and some actually helpful ones. And personally, I think the theming engine does a way better job, because that's quite important for me. I have a real black, deep theming engine. And with the AMOLED disc screen, this just looks way more impressive to me, and it's way capable more for day-to-day tasks, even though I would need some of the options. But I personally actually this time just prefer TouchWiz on its own. Now if we talk about the camera, the selfie game is absolutely strong on the Xperia X, and here I give it a clear win. It's one of the best selfie shooters that I had so far. Low light photography still goes to the S7 because it also brightens up the picture, but it's way more natural and accurate. Where I noticed on the Xperia X that it just brightens the picture up a bit too much. It's also not quite as sharp, but still also quite a good low light shooter. Once we go outside though, I still give a clear win to the S7. It's also not crazy sharp, colors are a little bit boosted, but it makes really nice pictures. On the Xperia X I had a little bit of a hit and miss. Sometimes I get great pictures, sometimes I get okay pictures, and sometimes I get quite bad pictures. But even the great ones, I have to still say, are not always properly in focus, and I'm just not that happy that it's not a user-friendly experience. You have to really know what you do to get good pictures, and I've seen a lot of people get great pictures, but I never get to do this. So this is a lot easier on the S7. When it comes to video though, it's a clear win for the S7. It makes the smoother video, 4K, way better transitions, brightness, exposure, everything works out just nice, and it's also easier capable. It just doesn't have so much artifacting going on. Where I noticed this on the Xperia X, that when I have fast movement, it artifacts a lot. Macro shots work really nice in videos, not so much for pics though. This is something that I talked about in my review. It's still a nice camera, but not quite on the same level. So in the end, let's get quickly through that. Design and build quality, I can't really choose an objective winner. Personally, subjectively, I would give it to the S7, mostly due to me preferring glass on glass, but if you see it objectively, it would be hard to choose a winner. Okay, the S7 is a little bit more compact since it has the bigger screen and it's pretty much the same size, but this is not enough to make a decision. Display, like I said, if you want a more impressive but therefore less accurate screen, the S7, also because of the better blacks and so on. But if you want the actual more natural, more accurate and slightly more vibrant picture, the X does a perfect job and would actually even win. Sound, I give the win for earphones, headphones, and also for the speaker to the S7, just louder and richer overall, so that's it. Performance, I give the win to the S7, but just mostly due to the better smoothness. If we would talk about more persistent performance or more consistent performance, less lags, then actually the X is the better performer, because I had less lag here, it was more consistent, so overall maybe the better experience if you want a consistent experience. But if you can live with a few amounts of lag but therefore have the smoother experience, then it's the S7. So it really comes down to what you want. It's a little bit laggy but therefore smoother against a little bit kind of less frame smooth versus the more consistent performance, more lag free. Now battery, I give a slight tendency to give the S7 the win due to the better Wi-Fi drain. If more data drain is better or more important for you, actually the X wins, but they are actually almost identical, so not enough to make an impact for a decision. Software, it comes down to what you want. More stock-like and less bloat, or actually pretty much no bloat, still a few enhancements, versus the way more feature-rich system that has a lot more bloat but is also a lot more capable. So it really comes down to what you want here. And the camera, if you want the easier experience for camera and video, the S7 just takes the cake, because it has, for a good reason, one of the best cameras on the market. I absolutely love it. It has a great experience, because someone like me who doesn't want to really think much about it and get great pictures and videos, this is what you get on the S7. On the Xperia X, it's a way more hassle to get all that. So this time I actually even won't choose a winner, because you have to consider one thing, the value. Right now, at least, I'm not quite sure how it's about your country, but here you can get the S7 sometimes already for about 550. I got mine for 500 because I sold my Gear VR, where this one is about 580 now. So in terms of value, I still think the S7 does an overall better job, but you also have to consider one thing, this is not the flagship yet. The proper comparison will be against the X Performance, which I will do once it's out. And once that falls a little bit in price more closer towards the S7, it could be an even closer fight, but for right now, and that is the important thing for me, the overall experience was absolutely great, because there was no deal breaker here on the X, unless maybe you want a easier camera and the better audio, because I've saw people complaining about the speakers just not being loud enough and they have to crank up the whole volume for the earphone. So I get that, that would be my gripe, because I had the Sony Xperia Z3 for 1.5 years, and that was one thing after a longer period of time that just did annoy me, because I just didn't get the audio experience that I wanted to. But the overall experience, except of that, is absolutely great, because I love the in-hand feel. The performance was absolutely flawless, absolutely satisfying, with a great vibrant screen, top battery life and all that. It's actually closer, and if it falls in price, it's definitely a better competitor than it is right now, maybe. But if you like Sony, it's actually a really close fight, and that would have been it, and I actually didn't fail as much as I expected to. Okay, so if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, it really means a lot to me. If you want to see more comparisons, more videos and reviews in general, just subscribe to the channel and maybe share the videos and so on, and I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.